Asphaltophones. Adrian Campbell.
And Karen Best.
So what is an asphaltophone? You can think of it a lot like a rumble strip, where when you drive over it with a car, it's going to produce noise. And those sounds come from vibrations in the air pockets created by those grooves in the pavement. They have been called many other names, including a musical road or a melody road, but they all come from the same art piece that two scientists created in Denmark back in 1995. And they have many applications, and in Japanese culture, they've been able to turn highways into places with a story. And while it might seem like these applications are all for entertainment, there are lots of practical applications as well. The asphaltophone only works when traveling at the specified speed, and the pitch is determined by how closely the grooves in the pavement are to each other. So the closer the distance, the higher the pitch.
Let me tell you a little bit more about how it works. To achieve the desired note of the vibraphone, you can take the velocity in meters per second of the vehicle and divide it by the fundamental period. The fundamental period is the distance between two consecutive peaks of the vibraphone. Consider the equation in the top right corner. Velocity over the fundamental period equals frequency, the frequency of the vibraphone's note that we're trying to play. Because the fundamental period is already set in stone, because it was etched in the stone in the vibraphone, the velocity is the only independent variable. Now consider the mass spring dampener system in the bottom right corner. Notice that looks a lot like a tire of a car, the way that it can move up and down. Most vehicles have a low natural frequency and are underdamped due to the very nature of the car's suspension system, allowing it to vibrate and make noise to begin with.
Traveling at the specified speed over these asphaltophones is very important to ensure that the music sounds the way that it should. This means that picking the right song when creating these asphaltophones is very important. However, in California, they ended up picking a song that sounded better when it was played faster. So this encouraged people driving along that strip of roadway to drive faster and more reckless, which defeated the purpose of encouraging people to drive the speed limit. In other instances of these asphaltophones, those grooves in the pavement was found to decrease the risk of hydroplaning when the roads were wet.
The human voice has a lot of intricacies that aren't inherently necessary for communication. A vocoder simplifies the frequency spectrum of the voice by dividing the frequency into bands. The speech signal is separated into multiple discrete spectral bands with bandwidths between 100 Hz to 400 Hz, covering the frequencies from 200 Hz to 3200 Hz. The less bands, the more reduced the information is until the information is lost. This frequency range is typically pretty good for cell phones because it's high intelligibility and good quality. Let me show you an example of how a vocoder works. First thing you're going to want to do is open your digital audio workstation. Mine's Ableton Live 10 Standard. And you're going to record some pretty crisp, really awesome, really epic and cool audio. What's shaking? Because we're in vibrations together, all of us. And things shake sometimes. Alright. Well, that's not embarrassing at all, if you ask me. But, anyways, zooming in on the audio, you can see all this information stored inside of it, which isn't necessary for communicating meaning at all. And that's what a vocoder is useful for, when you're trying to reduce the amount of information in a signal, but still convey meaning. So what a vocoder does is it takes that frequency, all of it, this frequency spectrum, and it divides it up into however many parts you set. This one's set at 20 bands. And the more bands, the more clear and normal the signal. The less bands, the less intelligible it is. So, applying the vocoder, it now sounds like this.
What's shaking? Because we're in vibrations together, all of us. And things shake sometimes. Alright.
And if you reduce the bands even further, let's go down all the way to 4. Yeah, that's absolutely unintelligible. So that's the general idea with what we're going to try and do with the asphaltophones. By separating them into different bands like this, we could kind of try and create the same effect. Could you encode the human voice onto an asphaltophone? Well, it's not set in stone quite yet, but maybe by using the vocoding method previously mentioned, you could divide the transverse asphaltophone width into these bands, simplifying the human voice significantly. After assigning these frequency ranges, you could adjust the width to match the desired volume. With more tire touching more of a specific frequency, it should be louder. Anyways, these are all just hypothetical and just thoughts. But thank you for joining us for our presentation.